Welcome to the Dynasty 365 show. Guys, tonight we are here with Tyler Heil. We are also here with our Fantasy and Frames CEO, Jorge Edwards. Guys, we've got a special treat for you. And Nate Markham and Gator J are in the house tonight. We are going to be doing a review of our Fantasy and Frames rookie draft that we did with our fam a few weeks ago. You guys are going to love it. Let's go. Hey guys, before we get started tonight, please go on over and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done that already. Make sure to like this video and head on over to fantasyandframes.com for more amazing fantasy football content from all of us here at Fantasy and Frames. Guys, we got a full house tonight. Look at this lineup. This is an all-star lineup. We got Tyler and Jorge and Jay and Nate. Guys, how are we doing tonight? Tyler, what's up? I'm going to start with you and go around the horn.
Around the frames, but I appreciate it.
Thank you. Around the frames. That's much better.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy that Nate has come out of his baseball cave to join us to talk football here for a night. So I'm pumped. This should be a fun time.
Yeah, I'm excited. Jorge, how has your day been?
It's been good. It's been not as productive as I was hoping for, but nevertheless, it is great having everybody on the show. It's good seeing Jay in front of the glass as opposed to behind the glass, one of the best producers out there in the fantasy football sphere. And, of course, my brother Nate. Always great to see you, my friend.
Hello. Nate, we got the mayor of Mexico down here, Mr. Nate Markham. How you doing? How's it going?
It's good. I wouldn't say the entire country, but I mean, do they have? And I don't think that's correct either. I don't believe the mayor would reside over an entire country, but maybe of a city, ciudad, if you will, in case for our Spanish speaking friends. That's what I picked up. But yeah, we're not doing baseball. Is that what
we can do? Hey, I'm ready to go. I got some baseball back here if we want to talk about the Braves. I'm good. Other than that, I don't know. I got nothing for you.
Yeah, I'll pass on that. The Braves are too good right now. So, can we talk about the Guardians? That would be a shit show to talk about.
That's depressing.
That's sad. No, it's great to be here with you guys. I told Jorge, it's like podcast, ready to come back, and I was like, I got a lot of baseball, and then bam, 7 hours later, I'm weak.
Just reeling you back in.
And now all this underdog talk.
Oh yeah. That's, so if you happen to do any of your pick'ems during the show, you're going to need to send out those cards so we can all get in on it. Okay.
All right.
I
don't know what that means, but I'm sure it sounds like you want all my answers.
Yeah. You'll learn. We'll share. We'll do a little group thread. We can all share. I'll win together. Jay, what's up? Last but definitely not least, how are you?
It's kind of weird being in front of the camera. Normally I'm behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for 365, but the other night we did Mocking After Dark, and we had Jorge and Nate jumped in, for what was supposed to be an hour-long show ended up being 2 hours because Nate has been away for so long doing baseball. He was yippy yappy about football, and this is like now he's wanting to get back to baseball. And no, we cannot talk about the Braves tonight because the Braves are looking like dog shit against the Dodgers right now. So, yeah, I'm ready to talk about this draft and not talk baseball anymore tonight. Thanks, Nate.
All right, well, that works. So if we're not talking baseball, then I want to talk about, before we get into our draft, guys, I was just kind of thinking, it's the off season. Every year I kind of look back at some lessons that I picked up during the season. And I think to myself, okay, what am I going to do differently next year? Like, what are some rules, kind of, so to speak, that I'm going to move with me on into the following season. So I want to hear some of your rules. Jorge, give me one from you.
So if you're a team that's rebuilding, fully commit to the rebuild. There have been the instances where we're going through our roster and it's like, yeah, I'm rebuilding. Let me try and get some trade value. But no, I'm not going to trade that player because I still like that player and I want to keep them around because why? Because out of some magical, experience situation, your team is going to be saved by this one person. No, make everyone available. Everything should be always negotiable. Be fluid, be water, like Bruce Lee said, and just commit to the rebuild and just do it properly if you're going to do it.
There you go. All right. Okay, Tyler, what's your fantasy rule?
It's a little bit like Jorge's. It's kind of don't be left holding the bag and understand what your team is in that specific league. If you have a team full of older vets, if your starting lineup is Keenan Allen and Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers and Derrick Henry, those are good players, but if you don't have a great roster around them, don't delude yourself into thinking that you're going to win this league. Those guys still have value. Don't sit on them thinking that you're going to win this league. And of course, you get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs because your team wasn't that good. Just take a step back, make an honest assessment of your team. Sorry. And my dog is making an honest assessment of a lot of my teams right now. I'll tell you that much.
I was just fixed to ask, is the dog saying bullshit? I couldn't understand what she said.
It's creating what is it an homage to what your teams look like?
But yes, don't be left holding the bag. Understand where you're at in your league, and don't sit there and let players lose all their value on your roster. Get some of that value while it's still there.
There you go. All right, Gator, you are up. What is your fantasy rule for the people?
Oh my good Lord. Quit sending trade offers with a trade calculator picture, because there are all stop doing that. That is irrational to think that every trade calculator is exactly the same. The one you're looking at, the one I'm looking at, I don't think I've ever sent one with a trade calculator attached to the trade offer. It's just ridiculous. So don't do that. Don't do that at all. You value your player. It's okay to go and look at a trade calculator to see if the value is close, or to see if you want to add another piece, or, not you adding a piece, sending, or, want to get another piece, or whatever the case is. And it's okay to have the dialogue that, hey, this is what I'm looking at, kind of how I value them. Don't send me a trade calculator from some obscure website, because at that point, it's just like, go ahead and just decline the trade, because I don't even care if I'm winning the trade at that point. Just stop.
Hey, at least they're offering, though, Gator. Don't you love when someone reaches out and solicits you about a player and then says, take a look at my roster and send me an offer?
Yes.
Yep.
No, ain't nobody got time for that. Nate, tell us your rule.
I'll piggyback a little bit off of Gator, but I'm going to go back to old people times where we didn't have trade calculators. What we had is a diatribe that people would send telling you how shitty the player is that they want from you, and why you wouldn't even want to hold on to that player because he's a bum, but I'm going to give you these 4 players. And that obviously was more likely back in the day when you wouldn't get shamed on social media. Social media wasn't as much, but it was the inevitable 3-for-1, talking about how, look, this is 150 points that they put up last year. Why would you want player A, B, and C's always injured? That is half of it. The other half, is this a RPG show, or is this NC-17?
Well, I'm about to not make it one with my rule, so you go for it.
Yeah,
They pushed the time clock back from 8 to 9, so we should.
Fair game.
Now we're talking
hours. Yeah,
it's not that bad, but it's don't be a dick and trade every fucking pick you have potential for the next 3 years, and then abandon the league as soon as you realize that you didn't win, and leave everybody else trying to scramble. Because what's the hardest team to fill? Hey, anybody want an orphan full of fucking Tyler's dog shit and the 1986 Braves leftovers?
Man.
Hey, can I piggyback?
My mother is not liking this episode on Facebook right now. I'll just tell you that.
I want to piggyback on that, because this is something that Scott Connor, you guys had him on a few weeks ago, but something Scott Connor lives by, and now Scott plays in way more leagues for way more money than I play in one league, right? But the way he does it, or the way he describes it, is if he's going to downsize a league, whether it's a winner, hopefully he's leaving the league as a winner 99% of the time when he does lead the league, but that team is paid for the next 2 years because he just won the league, right? So if you're going to leave a league, do it on the winning side. Leave the incoming manager a decent team to walk into. That way the commissioner has the opportunity to hopefully, without poaching all the players. And if that's happening, you're not going to get in the league anyway, but let the commissioner have the opportunity to fill that roster spot or fill that manager spot there with a decent team. And if it is a money league and you just want it, pay the next year at least.
Yeah, those are great
Amen.
rules, guys. So I did not take this little exercise nearly as seriously as you guys did, because here is my rule: is that and when it comes to running backs, you can never trust Kyle Shanahan. Okay. You just can't. You can't trust that man because, you might think to yourself, oh, they got CMC last year, right? So, of course he's going to be the guy. No, Shanahan is going to bone you at every turn because what's going to happen is that you're going to get down to the goal line. And you know who's going to go in for the touchdown? It's going to be Kyle Juszczyk. That's right. Kyle Juszczyk is going to go in for it, or Elijah Mitchell, or somebody else random. Okay. It's not going to be always CMC. So you can't trust that man. So that is my one rule that I always think about when I go into drafts. If I'm looking for players, I'm like, oh God, if I get CMC, like, do I take the other guys? Is that an option? So that's my fantasy rule going into every year. I've had that rule for a while, but you cannot trust Kyle Shanahan. He's not to be trusted at all. That's my rant.
That's pretty rude of you, as big of a Williams fan as you are.
Well, listen, there are just certain things, okay? And that is one of them. He's a menace. He's a menace to fantasy football. All right. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Guys, make sure if you are watching, you're listening in, make sure you are putting comments in those chats. We're going to get started here on our draft review. So I want to see comments in the chat. I want to see questions about our teams. Make sure to blow that chat board up, please. All right, guys. Jorge, are you able to show us the draft board?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, guys. So tonight, what we did a few weeks ago was we did a Fantasy and Frames group startup dynasty draft. Okay. What we did the current players first, and then we did a rookie draft. And so what you guys are seeing now, what we're going to review tonight is the rookie draft. All right. So this includes IDP players. And also, just so everybody knows, the draft order is a reverse of what the draft order was in the original draft. So that meant Jorge, who's in 12th spot down here in the rookie draft, was going first in that order during the original time. So I want to start actually with Jorge. I want to talk about your team, talk about your draft position, review your roster, tell the folks what you were thinking with each of your picks, and just kind of go from there.
Sure. So heading into the rookie draft, I had 4 running backs on my roster. And again, like you mentioned, it was an offense as well as IDP roster. I chose to go wide receiver heavy in my startup just because I wanted, little peek behind my thought processes. I always want to draft running backs and always emphasize wide receivers in startups because I want the running backs. And Nate, I was using this expression a lot on the mock draft show the other night. I want running backs with less tread on their tires. I want running backs with upside. And so heading into the rookie draft, picking at the 12th spot and having the back-to-back picks because we were doing a snake, I wanted to, definitely address running back, at least twice. And then and then I decided I wanted to get greedy. Why did I want to get greedy? Because at the time, my running backs on my roster were Ramondre Stevenson, Isaiah Pacheco, Alexander Madison, and Devin Singletary. And my thought process is if I could just get the 11th pick from Jonathan, who acquired that pick from Gator, I was going to be in a good spot, getting a good 3-for-1 swing here in the running back position. So I put this poll out on Twitter, and some of the people agreed with it. Some people slammed it. But I was telling them, this is what I did. I traded Jonathan, Isaiah Pacheco for a 24 first and a 23 third. And what I end up getting is Zach Charbonnet, Devin A. Chain, and Tank Bigsby for Pacheco, a first and a third. Now, my roster, which is a Superflex roster, I believe, is pretty well stacked in terms of wide receivers. You know, I have Olave, Keenan Allen, Pickens, Dotson. My tight end, that was kind of a weak area with just Brenton Strange and Dawson Knox, as well as my IDP roster, which is definitely going to, pay dividends down the road, as we'll get into my next pick after that. But the running back situation was just really, really, hurting me. So I really wanted to go young there and acquire people. Yes, Zach Charbonnet is going to be splitting some carries and opportunities there in Seattle. Devin Achane could potentially be fighting that, three-headed battle. But, and Tank Bigsby is the one I really wanted to make sure I got, because I truly believe he's going to be the 1A to 1B to ETN in Jacksonville. So, yeah, that's where I went with there. And then when I had my next pick, I wanted to pick an IDP player that I knew was going to step on the field week one and pay dividends. And it's kind of hard to avoid, whether it's in big play scoring, tackle heavy scoring, or balance scoring for IDP. Jack Campbell. I know there's a certain person on this panel here during the draft show we had covering round one was just ripping the Detroit Lions from a real football perspective, Nate, regarding Jack Campbell going at pick 18 overall. But for IDP,
you don't have Jack Campbell.
Oh crap! I don't. I traded that to Jonathan. Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no! That is not true at all. Okay, let's go back to the next pick. I went running back again. I blame the small screen. Got Israel Abanikanda, just so Dynasty Bill, aka Bill Mustafa, who is currently on hiatus, but will be back soon. Didn't get him. I wanted all the running backs. Then I wanted to address tight end with Brenton Strange. Evan Ingram only signed a 1-year deal, and there's been a lot of opportunity going to the tight end last year in Jacksonville. And then with my last pick, I just wanted to take a shot at wide receiver, and I went Parker Washington. Again, in Jacksonville, this offense should be humming. So even for a bye week fill-in potentially, or at least for a taxi squad this year, Parker Washington, why not at that point?
There you go. Okay. All right. So Tyler, you're up. You're drafting out of the 8 spot. Let's defend your draft. Let's go.
So my draft, frankly, the startup draft, my team's weird. When you don't go quarterback at the 7th spot in the first round of Superflex startup, your team's going to look a little awkward. I took Justin Jefferson at that spot. So I'm a little weak at quarterback. I'm a little weak at tight end. I'm a little light at running back. So it really, honestly, I have a balanced team. I just went best player available. I'm not great at any position, but I'm not bad at any position. So drafting from the 8th spot, it worked out for me that my starting tight ends before this draft were Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, people like that. And Dalton Kincaid fell into my lap at the 108. And that was an easy pick for me. I try to, at least at the top of these drafts, go based off of my tiers. Tiers get a little muddled when you start getting past like the 5th tier, but my tiers up top are pretty defined. My running backs up top were Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. My quarterbacks were the 3 quarterbacks that went boom, 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 3, 4, 5, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. And my 2 wide receivers were Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Drafting with a bunch of sharps like these clowns, it went pretty chalk. So Dalton Kincaid fell right into my lap. Coming back around, I had my own second round pick. I'm not one to move around in a draft a whole lot. I'll move if there's a player that I want, but I'm not someone that's going to go out in front of the draft and just start trying to acquire picks just because they're there. Mm-hmm. So I just typically stick and pick. I wanted a running back. Jorge decided to take every single one of them. And Kendre Miller went the pick for me. So I went with my tiers. I trusted my evaluation, and I took Jaden Reed from the Packers with my second pick. Big fan of him. He can get open really well. I think Jordan Love is surrounded by some solid weapons with Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. I'm excited to see him play. Coming back in the third round, I took Hendon Hooker. Superflex league, Hooker has been my quarterback 3 or 4 throughout this entire process. It has varied, but I really like him as a player. I also have Jared Goff on my team, so I have Goff's backup when he gets healthy and possible successor in the future. So very happy with that. Came back. I went Drew Sanders. Then I went Miles Murphy, defensive lineman that the Bengals drafted, a little pass rusher, and Jartavius Martin. What did they call him? Quan Martin? Was that it? Jartavius is his real name, but he doesn't go by it. So I felt pretty good about the draft. The rookie draft went about the same as my startup, balanced. I didn't hit any specific position group, but I'm good at all of them. The pick I was most excited about, I was really happy to have Dalton Kincaid fall into my lap, but Drew Sanders, I was really pumped for him. He went in the very beginning of the third round to the Broncos. He was probably regardless of where Jack Campbell went, he was a lot of people's top linebacker on the board. He absolutely killed at Arkansas. He led the team in every single statistical category that you can think of. And the Broncos need some pass rushing juice badly. Yeah. They have an injured Randy Gregory. Their 2 leading sackers? They're 2 leading
edge rushers.
What? Edge rushers? Sure. They're 2 most productive pass rushers. There we go. Okay. Their 2 most productive pass rushers from last year are both gone. Then it's Baron Browning. So they're going to need some juice badly. And their defensive coordinator is, oh my God. Why did I forget his name? Help me out here. Vance Joseph. Jesus. It completely blanked me. He loves to blitz. Absolutely loves to blitz. The last 4 years, he's been the DC of the Cardinals. They've finished 3rd, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd in blitz rate in the NFL. So they're going to have to get juice somewhere. Drew Sanders led Arkansas in sacks last year. And it's difficult for linebackers to get on the field sometimes, but he's going to get on the field in pass rush situations. So I was excited about that one. And I know Jorge immediately tried to get him from me, and I told him to go away.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of that, so since we have our 2 IDP guys here, Jorge and Nate, I want to ask you guys, what do you guys think about Tyler's last 3 picks there? Nate, we'll start with you, and then Jorge, I want you to chime in too.
Yeah, and like Tyler had said, Drew Sanders, atop many of people's board. The one thing that's going to be nice too is if utilized depending upon the scoring format, Sleeper's pretty quick to give designations if you're within reaching distance of that area. And it wouldn't shock me to see him get a defensive line designation at some point. And from a startup's familiarity, the defensive line depth is pretty weak. And if you can get Drew Sanders to add to Tyler's already. So if you look at his linebacking core or his defensive end core, Miles Murphy is going to replace, or not replace, but kind of replace. I mean, Montez Sweat and Miles Murphy are his 2 really defensive linemen, on top of some aging Zadarius Smith, who had a great change of scenery. You throw in Jalen Phillips, Rashawn Gary, Micah Parsons. He's got just pass rushers and multi-position eligibility stalwarts. So I think that he did a good job of adding another piece there in both Drew Sanders and Miles Murphy. And Martin, from a defensive back standpoint, the one nice thing about that is that he had the ability to really play in the box a little bit more. He had a couple of years where he had 50 tackles with Illinois. And that was just that Illinois secondary. If you want to talk about, as they say, like Miami's tight end U, or name another school that has an analogy or whatever comparison, Illinois is quickly turning into defensive back U. And you've seen that with 3 different players drafted this year, and then on the heels of Kirby Joseph last year. So I like all the picks. I think that IDP is the one that, if you can gain a competitive edge in a position, I think that IDP, a lot of people kind of, I don't want to say sleep on it, but it's hard. Not everybody knows it. And Tyler, listens to us and absorbs as much as possible, and hence why he's gonna probably screw up, because we don't know what we're talking about.
That's precise. That's actually precisely why I drafted so many people with dual eligibility.
I love it.
My thought process too.
Strategy. Jorge, what are your thoughts about Tyler's picks?
So I guess, one of the things to pay attention to with Drew Sanders is, he was both used as an edge rusher as well as an off-ball linebacker. So, really hoping for that dual eligibility to come into play, because if that's the case, I think he could start week 1 or at least very early on in the season as an edge rusher, versus if he just only maintains linebacker eligibility. And of course, I'm just talking about playing on sleeper at the moment. He has to compete with Josie Jewell with Alex Singleton, and then which one is he going to take snaps away from? So that could be a potential hiccup there. But again, if he lines up as edge, I think he should be ready to go. And we saw his production in college. Murphy going in Cincinnati. Nate, we've talked about this on Shoot the Gap, which is every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. There's a rotation that's a brewing, whether it's with Trey Hendrickson or Hubbard there. One of those players is not meant to be in Cincinnati for the long haul. Contract wise, we know Joe Burrow's contract's coming up. You got Chase, you got Higgins, you got all these contracts that are going to be coming up. Somebody's going to have to be taking a pay cut, and they're probably going to do it on the defensive side of the ball. So Murphy is really good at both rushing the passer as well as playing against the run, where you have Trey Hendrickson, who's more of a pass rusher, not like a tackle accumulating run stopper. And, the opposite to a degree can be said about Hubbard. So it's one of the Sam Hubbard. So Miles Murphy could be walking into a really good situation a couple of years from now. So definitely somebody that you should be really happy with in terms of edge rusher upside for Dynasty for the long haul. And then Nate, you mentioned Martin, the box snaps early, where he gets his value from and helping in run support. So I thought you did a really good job there, Tyler.
Nice.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Gator, you are on the clock.
Well, so of course, as you look at this board, I had the second pick overall. So I, even in a super flex, studded out with Josh Allen, came right back around and got Stephon Diggs in the second round. So I immediately got my stack right there. And this is just so everybody knows, this is a full point tight end premium. So I ended up getting Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson in the startup draft. So I kind of just didn't get studs at wide receiver. So that was something that other than getting Diggs there, that was something I wanted to do. But in that startup draft, I made a trade, or I made basically back-to-back trades, one with Tyler for a pick. And I don't remember exactly where that was, but directly after that was another trade I made with Chris. He wanted the wide receiver from Tennessee,
Treylon Burks.
Yeah, he wanted Treylon Burks, and I had just, I was in talks with Tyler, giving up my 24 first. Or sorry, 23. Jonathan giving up my 23 first round pick, which turned out to be the 111, which he turned around and flipped. But at that same time, I was talking to Chris, and I wanted to get back up into the top 6, top 7 for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Drew would not come off a 6, so I went to 7, and Chris was able to give me 7. So I went with Jordan Addison there. I love Addison as a player, and I think that with no what's the young kid that just now the old man that just left and is going out to
Adam
Thielen, that guy, yeah. Which is, by the way, you can get him for next to nothing now, and he's probably going to be a league winner. With no Thielen there, I think Addison's going to step into a role where he's going to get 70, 80 targets this year, even with Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson there. So I think that was a hammer right there. I mean, Tyler talked about Addison earlier being one of his top wide receivers. I think Addison was, if not number 2, he was within those top 3 picks or top 3 rankings with the wide receivers there. The second round, I went and probably reached a little bit, but I wasn't going to let him get away. And I was the first one in this draft to go after an IDP player, and I went after Will Anderson. I just think that he's going to be an absolute stud in Houston. And believe it was either that day that we were drafting or the day before we drafted, Sleeper gave him dual designations. So it was automatic hammer for me. I was trying to get to him. I was able to make a trade with Rhett, get back to that 212. So I may have grabbed him a little early. I didn't care. That's the player that I wanted in this draft more than any other player. So that left me with no third round pick. Wrapping around in the 4th round. Again, I got Hawkinson and Pitts in the first initial startup. So I came back around, and Musgrave was off the board. Schoonmaker was off the board. Of course, Kincaid, Mayer, and Laporta were all off the board. And I was like, you know what? Dart throw time. Darnell Washington. Even though I'm a Gator, the athletic ability is just crazy with this guy.
I hear he's got big hands.
That's when
How big?
How big are they, Stacy?
11 inches is what I hear.
Yeah, but how big is 11 inches though? I mean, I mean, do we know how big 11 truly is?
A sheet of paper. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I tend to know that a little bit better. You guys,
Right.
guys aren't always as good with measurements, so I don't know. I don't know who to believe here.
My tape measure has cuts and great, gaps in it, so I don't know what this is either.
I don't know. That's weird. I've got a Sharpie here. That's what I thought it was.
Oh, okay. You were probably like most of us and going that the cap's 11 inches. Oh, Lord have mercy.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I threw Darnell Washington in there. Again, we're talking about a tight end premium. I figured I'd throw a dart there. And then this is where I want to know what Jorge and Nate both think about these 2 picks as well. Again, I went IDP with Clancy going to Tampa Bay. I think he's going to be an absolute stud there with Vita Vea as well. And then I think Witherspoon coming over to Seattle. It just seems like what Seattle's doing, they're trying to rebuild that Legion of Doom again. So that's where I went with my draft. I enjoyed the hell out of it, to be quite honest. I think I've got at least got a playoff contender. Unlike Tyler, I do have a stud here and there. But here's a funny thing though, and this is what scares me with Tyler and Nate both. Between everybody else in the draft made one trade at least. Tyler and Nate both were like, I'm just gonna stay right here. Now, Nate to Nate's defense though, he was playing baseball at the time.
I'd also said I think that we play by the rules. Don't take advantage of your fellow drafters, and I adhere to that. And I didn't think it was fair to start off the season by taking advantage of you guys early on. Do that in the season when you can make trades and manipulate people. That's just me being friendly. And by the way, you say this Adam Thielen old talk shit. Adam Thielen's 32 years old. Calm down. He's
Ancient.
up. He's up. Bro's fine. He's not really.
Rome called, and they've already put up a statue in front of the.
Oh, poor Adam Thielen.
Well,
I'm getting him in best ball tonight. When I do it, I'm guaranteed I'm gonna go and snag him up in best ball, probably like the 15th round, 14th, 15th.
Yeah, do a little Carolina stack. That might be fun.
yeah.
Maybe.
Hey, and in my defense here, Gator, I don't love trading up because I like having my picks. I like having all the shots. I trust my evaluation on a lot of these players. I think I can hit more often than not on some of these late picks, so I just stick with it.
No, I wasn't making fun of it at all, Tyler. I was actually I was impressed that because I am one that likes to move down, try to gain. If I had my normal pick at the 11 there, and for instance the board runs like it is, I like Charbonnet. Yes, I like A-Chain. Yes, I like Bigsby's, but I'm probably going to try to move that 111, to pick up later picks to get more darts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish I could have maybe looked into the one thing I should have paid attention to, I guess, a little bit more is knowing that one of my weaknesses, not to get into my team yet, but with a lack of depth at wide receiver, and Jonathan's drafting ahead of me, who has nothing but depth at wide receiver. I mean, Jonathan's draft went, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty certain it was wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew I was going to be behind a little bit, and I'd like to maybe
when you say his draft, you're talking about his
beginning draft where he started off where he has Chase, Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, and whoever. So he wasn't going to address wide receiver. So I knew that it was going to be quarterback, and I like CJ Stroud. I have no problem with that. I just don't know. The thing is at 4. What am I going to move up? Stacy, were you ever going to give up the number 2 spot and not take Jahmyr Gibbs?
No, actually. And somebody asked me about that too, if I remember right. And I was like, no, I like where I am. I had planned when we did the original draft, I was obviously in the 11th spot. And so some of my players were a little bit older. And so I planned for that, knowing, okay, once we get to the rookie draft, I'll be in the 2nd spot and I can kind of address some of those needs there. So I was definitely not willing to part with number 2.
That's actually an interesting question or way of phrasing that, because I had asked Rhett in his regular draft, he actually did draft, he went Breece Hall in the 3rd round. He took Josh Jacobs, followed up later with David Montgomery. And I asked him, I was like, knowing that you were going to get Bijan, did the pick of Josh Jacobs in the 3rd round seem like excess where you could have maybe went and said maybe Cooper Kupp or DK Metcalf and addressed a different position? And he said he was comfortable with having just the extra depth. And I don't criticize that. I wonder if that went into other people's thought process of, all right, if I know I'm going to have the number 2 pick and have my choice of Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs, mostly Jahmyr Gibbs, will that change your draft strategy a little bit? So interesting to hear you mention that too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely did. And I mean, I definitely get it. Like at running back, you want to have some depth there. So I see what Rhett was doing. I mean, it's such a volatile position, guys get injured so quickly there. So you definitely want to have, a lot of backups just in case. That's kind of my thought, at least with running backs anyway. But yeah, so speaking of mine, so I drafted out of the 2 spot in this rookie spot, and I got a lot of like big eye emojis, when I took Gibbs at number 2, and I just feel like I need to defend myself. Thank you, Stephanie. Very smart planning ahead. That's my girl. I like it. Thank you. Appreciate you. So like I did go pretty old at running back going, in the beginning of the draft or in the original part, because I was at 11, right? So all the good quarterbacks are gone at that point. I went ahead and took McCaffrey. And I know I just got done ranting about McCaffrey, right? Don't worry though, because I did take Elijah Mitchell as a backup. So I am covering my bases in with San Francisco. So I have McCaffrey and Aaron Jones are my 2 starting running backs. So they've got some miles on them. So that's why when I was thinking, okay, back when we get to the rookie spot, I'm definitely going to go with Bijan, Gibbs, somebody like that. And thank goodness I did, because if you take a look at the board, right, look who went after that. I mean, Jorge's down here snatching all the running backs. Gator, you're not helping, right? So we've got Charbonnet, A-Chain, Bigsby, Spears, Evans, Miller, Roschon, Chase Brown. Like all those guys are gone. So if I had waited on running back, look who the next available person is Sean Tucker. I think when we right?
Yeah,
that's not the best. That was not the
best.
Well,
no, he's the first person
he was
taken.
the first person taken. But so look who else though. We've got Izzy, Deuce Vaughn, Evan Hull, Kenny McIntosh, Eric Gray. Like I don't think that I would have wanted any of the. I mean, I like those players, but considering what I had in my head as far as strategy, that's kind of that wouldn't have worked with what I was planning. So that's why I went ahead and took Gibbs there. It's not that I don't like all those quarterbacks, I do for sure, but just for this particular build, that's what I was planning to do. And every day, Superflex Dynasty, am I going quarterback at number 2? Probably so. But this particular one, I just felt like Gibbs fit my team a little bit better. And I know I've talked so much about like how much I love him in his landing spot there, but I think he's going to be like, running back 1, right? David Montgomery behind him is just kind of like a plotter, just kind of like a boring running back, right? I think he's going to fill that Jamal Williams role, but he's just not going to be as fun. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs there like kind of steps in and like takes the bulk of that. So I'm excited about him. I like his potential, and especially on that offense that they have going on in Detroit. I'm really excited about that. My next pick, round 2, was Jalen Hyatt, who, like, admittedly, not my favorite receiver out of this group. I probably would have taken Mingo if Bill hadn't sniped me before with Jonathan Mingo. So I took Hyatt, and, here's my thought process there. It's like, look, you've got a room of just mediocre talent at that position in New York. Okay. So why not? I mean, he could potentially be the shining star of that mediocre group, and hopefully he's a little better than mediocre. But I like Jalen Hyatt a little. He's got some talent. He could be that field stretcher for the Giants. So I didn't hate taking a dart throw with him at that point. I mean, it's not like you're getting Addison or JSN or anything in the second round anyway. So you're kind of starting to look at the guys that are a little bit down in those lower tiers. Now I did do some trades, and I am a little bit adverse to trading. But I did go ahead and dip my toe into that in the third round. And so Bill and I swapped spots, and I took my beloved Marvin Mims. Because even at that point when we were doing this draft, I can't leave a draft without Marvin Mims. I'm just obsessed with him. And I can't believe that he fell to me in the third round, right?
Why do you like him so much, Stacy?
Wait,
Okay.
that's collusion. We know
Let me tell you, Tyler, why I like him so much. So, one, right, I liked him before he got drafted. So it wasn't even that, he went to Denver and Sean Payton picked him specifically, which I think are all great things. And I think, mean that he's definitely going to have a role in that offense, regardless of whether Sutton and Judy are still there or one of them gets traded. It doesn't matter. But like Stephanie said in the chat, our minds have melded. Okay. Mims catches everything. He does catch everything. And he just gets so much separation down the field. He's so freaking fast. I just love everything that he brings to the table. He is amazing. And I just think that like him going in the third round is just almost criminal. But anyway, I was glad that I could snatch him up. So that might be one of my favorite picks from my team. But after that, and I did swap again here. So you can see I kind of went a little bit higher up. And I did my one and my only IDP pick here with Jalen Carter. And I will tell you, admittedly, I do not know that much about IDP at all. So I was like, let me find a player whose name I know. And that's what I'm going after. That was my number one priority. I was like, let me find somebody who I know before they get snatched. And then I'm kind of like flying blind. But I just thought with Carter, I mean, like he's the 9th overall pick, right? I mean, like that Eagles defense just keeps getting better. And I think he's going to have the opportunity to have a ton of production there. So I felt good with that pick. I think everybody kind of knows about Jalen Carter, the good and the bad. So I hear he's a pretty good player. So I'm pretty pleased with that pick. And Jorge, Nate, I mean, what do you guys think about him? Did I make a good choice there?
Oh, the upside's amazing. There's a potential for him. And then the concerning part when you take an interior defensive lineman in IDP is that sometimes their role is more football advantageous than IDP advantageous. Them disrupting the offensive line and putting pressure on the quarterback doesn't always translate to points. Mm-hmm. But he's an elite talent. And if there's a person who can make that happen, we've seen that on the interior defensive line. Players like Christian Wilkins, we've seen players like Aaron Donald. I'm not trying to compare these guys, but it's not shocking to see Cameron Hayward and some of these other names more and more find their way to the forefront of being valuable players in IDP. And you already have Aiden Hutchinson.
Yep.
So you already have a top 12 defensive line player. You have an aging Cameron Jordan, but still productive Cameron Jordan. And then then at linebacker, that's probably if there's a weakness per se, it may be that position, just because Isaiah Simmons is better served as a defensive back for you, because that's the designation that he'll be able to have, but he's fine at linebacker. And Bosa at linebacker, again, you miss out on some tackles, and maybe it would be nice to go after. And this isn't a beat up session by any means, so please don't take it for that, because Gators talking about drafting all these defensive linemen, and he doesn't have a a linebacker that can be on the field. Jack Sanborn and Christian Harris. Good God, Gator. I feel like I'm glad I didn't trade with you. You might have made another bad decision and dupe yourself. You'd have been the guy leaving the league. You'd have been the guy that traded all your picks away and then abandoned it.
Listen, Nate, this is all,
Wow.
This is all very fair, but this is why I have Jack on my team is because of you not knowing what the hell you talking about last year.
Nobody knew who's going to get hurt. I'm sorry. I'm not clairvoyant with injuries. I wish I was, but I put my foot in my mouth enough times. You think I'd have a jaw injury by now.
Let me just say, as somebody who rosters Joey Bosa in a dynasty league, he's actually dual eligible. So another defensive lineman that you have, who he has been in the league for a while, but his production, his pressure rate, I was trying to trade him actually in one of our, and Nate, I think you and I are in the same dynasty league. I was trying to trade him away because I was thinking his pressure rate had been decreasing as he's been getting older. He has been as consistent as can possibly be. So again, another feather in your cap there at the defensive line position there, Stacy.
Just the dart throws. And I am just only slightly embarrassed to say that I picked Aiden Hutchinson because of his Billie Jean karaoke that he did on Hard Knock.
That's okay.
You know,
Was it the singing or was it the dancing part that was like, yeah,
both? I think both were. I mean, like, come on, that was an excellent performance, and I like people that can do have multiple talents, right? So defense and excellent singer / dancer performer from Aiden Hutchinson. So I like that. Well, thank you guys. So last couple picks for my little team here. I took Kenny McIntosh, which is probably no surprise if you've heard me talk at all about the running backs from this year's draft. Just kind of wanted to throw in another running back there, somebody that I kind of liked, given especially like what we had available at that point in the draft in round 5. That Seattle offense, right? They're going to run. So even though they've got those 3 guys there, they've got Walker, Charbonnet, and Kenny McIntosh. I mean, they're going to run. And I like Kenny McIntosh as a dual threat guy. If I remember correctly, he was one of very few players that has a 500 season, 500 rushing yards, 500 receiving yards in his last year. So I like that player. I think that he brings a lot to the table there. And then my very last pick, I had to go with a homer pick here and take a Packer. So I took Tucker Kraft. I hadn't taken a tight end yet. And the tight ends that I have are, I've got a nice little collection group. I've got, let's see, I've got McBride, I've got Bellinger, Njoku, and now I've got Kraft. So I figured out of one of those, groups, somebody or out of that group that somebody's going to hit, or at least hopefully somebody will hit. But that's kind of what was my thought process there. I actually have been thinking of taking Stetson Bennett because I had not taken a quarterback yet. And I thought, it's the last round. Why not do a dart throw? If something happens to Stafford, maybe Bennett steps up. But I got sniped right beforehand by Drew. So thanks, Drew. So Tucker Kraft it is. So that is my team. Like I said, probably Gibbs or Mims is my favorite pick out of this group. But again, no surprise if you've listened to me at all talk about any of these rookies. So Nate, you're up.
I am. And I, as I said, I would love to have been able to switch Jonathan with that first pick, just because I went in with the 8th pick from the regular draft and my, I start off with Justin Fields. I was comfortable with that. And then, like Gator mentioned earlier, and the full point tight end premium, getting Travis Kelce there, it was, I think, a no-brainer. But I get it. How many years left does he have? But still, even 3 years of Travis Kelce is better than 10 years of almost every other tight end out there, not named Kyle Pitts, possibly. Running back, it was iffy. I went Travis Etienne and Tony Pollard, so I was fine with at least a little bit of youth there. But then when Derrick Henry fell to the 8th round, I thought at age-wise is okay. I didn't expect him to be something that I'm going to lean on heavily going forward, but I also know that meant that with 2 undersized backs that aren't exactly the exclusives, I know the 1A, 1B type scenario in Jacksonville and Dallas with the ETN and Pollard, going to have to address running back in this draft at some point. The biggest issue that I ran into is my receiving core is less than fantastic. It's a lot less than fantastic. And I didn't really care too much for this draft to move a ton of picks to move around. And so what I did is I focused on the one area that I'm pretty comfortable with is IDP value and being able to establish, which is the one benefit of an IDP league like this, as deep as this is as bad as my receiving core is, there's cost value replacements, and my defensive line and linebacking core, maybe in defensive backs, if I can get enough value out of those positions, I can offset my inadequacies at wide receiver. And I think I did that for the most part. I mean, my defensive ends, if you listen to the names, I have Nick Bosa, I have Myles Garrett, and Cameron Hayward. That should be fine for the next, 5, 6, 10 years of defensive line work. At linebacker, Bobby Wagner, Bobby Okereke, Cole Holcomb, Ernest Jones, solid at linebacker there as well. And at defensive back, Grant Delpit, Harrison Smith, Kyle Hamilton, and Ryan Neal gives me stability throughout the IDP side. So I'm not as uncomfortable as I would like to be going into the offensive side for this rookie draft. That being said, I didn't like a lot of the options outside after the first 2 rounds. CJ Stroud, like I said, Justin Fields was my one. I waited a very long time to get my number 2, like way too long. Like Jimmy G is my number 2 long. And that's okay. If it is what it is. As a 2 with CJ Stroud being that I don't know, subsequent fill in if you want. I would love for him to take over and be ahead of Justin Fields. I don't have quite the ceiling for Stroud as maybe others. Anthony Richardson might be a different situation, but it is what it is. The nice thing with Chase Brown is that watching him in Illinois, there's a good chance that for the next 2 to 3 years, I have Cincinnati's lead back. I mean, there's really not a ton of competition for him not to just be the exclusive backup this year. And while I like Joe Mixon, especially for the value where he's going in a lot of drafts I've seen, going forward, I think we have to assume that he's short for the Bengals. And Jorge on, I don't know how many different leagues, God, it feels like 4 or 5 different mock drafts that we've done together. He always takes Brown right ahead of me. And for the same reasons. It's, when you're talking about a dynasty situation, you want the path of least resistance on an offense that's going to generate an opportunity for high point, touches, which for him could be goal line work. Back-to-back 1,100 plus yard seasons in Illinois. He can run between the tackles. Pass catching is okay. Nothing to write home about, but they can lean on him. And so I'm comfortable with Brown. This turns into the next blah. And don't get me wrong. Cedric Tillman and Xavier Hutchinson are not 2 wide receivers that I went into this draft looking to draft. Right after Tillman, of course, I know the first thing that some people may say if they know me is, well, you had Rashee Rice. Why not just take him? And honestly, I thought that the path for Tillman to be the one in that offense is greater than Rashee Rice ever has to be the one in KC. As much as I like Rice, I think he fills a Juju role, and a Juju role is a good wide receiver 4, 3.5 in that offense where they spread it around. Tillman, Tyler, I'll ask you. Next year, the last year for Amari Cooper, is there an opt-out or an option for him to be gone after this year?
There's absolutely an option for him to be gone. I think they're going to keep him. He's a good player.
He's a great player.
Like everyone keeps talking about him being a cap casualty, but he's easily their wide receiver 1. He makes their offense go. Sure, he's going to make $20 million against cap, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The cap's going to be $260 million next year.
Yeah, no, and that's not a knock against Cooper. It's a path to playing time, and is not a concern with DPJ. But for a guy, for the skill set that Tillman has, is to be a big body presence that he's going to have some familiarity and comfort with. I don't think he's going to do too much in the route tree necessarily, but I can be wrong. That's the nice thing is if I draft on height alone, I've got about 13 feet of wide receiver right there, and that should be worth something. When have tall receivers ever let us down in the past? I mean, never, right? Never.
They always hit.
Always hit.
Every single one has been Calvin Johnson.
Say Dwayne Bowe?
That was me joking. Yes, sorry.
Dwayne Bowe, I believe, had a 1,200-yard season. So I will take that as a rookie for Cedric Tillman. You heard it here first. The next Dwayne Bowe.
And the Browns promptly gave him $20 million. So good for the Browns.
Maybe that was the joke that Jorge was making that I missed, is not the production with Kansas City, but the subsequent overpaying for his services.
A little bit of A, a little bit of B. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. A little multifaceted joke. That's why you're good at this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So then to round this out, I did finish up with some IDP because that's about the other names that I knew. Honestly, I hate to say it. I was still in baseball mode, and some of these names I don't have a reason in case Stacy wants to bring me on a podcast 2 months later and say, Nate, why did you make that pick? I don't have to go, his name is Kuntz. And you would say it's Kuntz. And I'd say, I didn't know. My bad. So I went with Marte Mapu, who was a stud. Just the most one of the more underrated. Daniel Jeremiah, who I have great respect for, thinks he was maybe one of the best players in the draft. Probably the best unheard of player. And he joins a New England team that could utilize him inappropriately or appropriately. He has defensive back designation and very easily could be a linebacker. And last but not least, Trenton Simpson, who should fill into that Baltimore Patrick Queen role at linebacker. There's a good chance that he turns out to be the best linebacker of this group as far as IDP scoring. I don't believe that's going to be the case necessarily. My money would go to Jack Campbell as far as total points for tackles. But you can't, doesn't hurt to have Trenton Simpson on a defensive, I'd say, forward team in Baltimore.
All right. I feel like this is the most I've heard Jack Campbell's name, I think, ever tonight on this podcast. So, Jack Campbell, you are a celebrity. I hope you're listening. Guys, so I want to ask you kind of beside your own team, obviously, like which team is your favorite out of this crew? Tyler, besides yours, who do you like?
Oh, crap. We're just this crew, or can we just say in the league?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. Yeah. In the out of all 12.
Okay. So I absolutely am hitting myself for even wanting to say this, but I'm going to because he's just going to lord it over me. Mm-hmm. I really like Drew's team. I think he did a really good job balancing it. He has good quarterbacks. He has Lamar Jackson. He has Stafford. He has Trey Lance, who isn't dead yet. He has the Will Levis, he'll start next year. He has Brissett, who eventually should start once the Washington football team realizes that Sam Howell's not it. He's got really good IDP players. He's got Khalil Herbert, Antonio Gibson rounding out some of his flex spots. And with the league this deep, those are the hardest spots to fill. Those last two flex spots are how you can kind of judge a roster. Mm-hmm. And he has Gibson and Herbert. He has Jackson Smith and Njigba on his bench. So I hate it, but I like Drew's team.
So
and I hate the Sean Tucker part of it.
So Drew's in the chat. Drew is listening. He definitely likes the Sean Tucker pick. Sounds like that might be his favorite. And Drew, I guess I'll forgive you for sniping my Bennett pick since you did have Stafford. I guess that's acceptable. You're forgiven. I know you're real worried about that. Jorge, which team is your fave?
I'm going to go with Chris's team. He addressed in the earlier draft quarterback with Herbert and Watson. He came back in this draft, the rookie draft, and he grabbed Roshan Johnson to pair with to add to Najee Harris and Saquon Barkley as his running backs here. I like the Lucas Van Ness pick, even though he's just defensive line only eligible. I think he's going to pay dividends in Green Bay, whether he's at outside linebacker or he's actually on the three-man defensive line. For me, though, he did a really good job of planning ahead at defensive back. He got Jack Campbell. That's obvious. We're hearing the name again. But at defensive back, he really did a good job getting Jordan Battle as late as he did. Possibly going to be filling in for Jesse Bates and pairing him with Dax Hill, kind of the future at safety for the Cincinnati Bengals. So definitely a fan of that pick from an IDP perspective. A little bit lesser known player, but I think somebody whose name you're going to be hearing a lot about in IDP scoring. So yeah, I thought he hit every position he needed to. Like I mentioned, Jack Campbell, he's pairing him with Frankie Louvu, TJ Edwards, Zaire Franklin. I mean, he's got studs at every position. I guess the only one he didn't every position. I take that back. Not tight end. Yeah, Zach Kuntz. I don't know what to say about Zach Kuntz. I think Nate said it all earlier. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much it. I think he did a really good job, Chris.
Nice. All right, Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to go with one of the other guys, but since he was already spoken on, I'm going to go with Jonathan. I love what Jonathan did. It's already been said, where he in the startup draft, he took Chase and Lamb, and I mean, he just built this wide receiver core. Didn't do very much in the wide receiver or in the quarterback room with Pickett and Love, and then he's got Mac Jones and Zach Wilson, but then he turns right around in the rookie draft and gets, complete upside, probably the biggest ceiling we've seen for a quarterback in a while, in Anthony Richardson. And then he somehow in the fourth round gets Butte and pairs him up with Mac Jones. As far as the defensive side of the ball, I don't know a ton about it. So but I can look at the names and I can see the names he has. So I think he's got pretty damn good players over there, if I'm not mistaken there, Nate. But
I love some of his defensive players.
But probably the more important thing is he did all of that and then added another 2024 first round pick. Mm-hmm. Now he's sitting there. I think Tyler also has an extra 2024 first round pick, but so he's already started to add picks for next year, along with getting this wide receiver room, these stud wide receivers, and then he's sitting there with now next year he's got to look at running backs, and that's what you want to look at in the draft, like Jorge said earlier. So I really love how Jonathan built this team.
So I actually was going to say Jonathan too. I really like the pick just for all the same reasons that you just mentioned. And Jonathan, when you listen to this, you're welcome for letting you get Anthony Richardson, since I did not take him. But I like his team for exactly all the same reasons. I like that Mayer pick too, because I think that he's going to be one of the few rookie tight ends rather, that is stepping into that role, that number one role now that, Waller and Moreau are gone. He's got a great path to having some production there. So I like Jonathan's team too. Nate, who's your pick?
All good picks so far. I will admit, looking through a lot of the teams, justifiable for what you guys have said. Not a different strategy or a different approach, but I'll say that sometimes just winning now is better than any forecasting for the future. Maybe not necessarily, because nothing sucks worse than being 3 seasons in and having your dynasty team look like all those old people like Adam Thielen. But Billy Mustafa's team for a win now situation, Billy's is in a good spot. I mean, if you look at just Tyler touched on one thing very, I think, important, is that with the multiple flex spots, if you can consolidate and get the most value out of that, his flex spot number one will probably be George Kittle, who is in a tight end premium. This is Billy's 3 tight ends that he has in a tight end premium: Mark Andrews, George Kittle, and Darren Waller. Now, I'm not saying that that's like the end all be all, but that's pretty solid 3 tight ends to be able to mix and match, especially within that flex spot. But Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, obviously he had, depending upon what your take on Daniel Jones is, but even if anything, Bryce Young to follow up. At that point, the running backs are, they're about 200 years old between the 5 of them, but it's Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. I realize that's in a couple of years, that'll be a weak spot at running back. I think we all know that, but hopefully he can maybe win now and address that later. with the intent of the wide receiver. Wide receiver is a little weak with A.J. Brown and Mike Williams, but the upside of Kadarius Toney and Gabe Davis, Chase Claypool, Khalil Shakir, Paris Campbell, Robert Woods. I mean, a lot of names that we go, the ceiling is okay. The floor is not existent for many of them, but just that blended in with some decent IDP, a lot of age in IDP as well. Billy's the player that if he starts trading picks and players, he's gone. He ain't coming back at next year. So we'll go ahead and collect his money for 2024 and 2025 because that team's going to be retired. But I like win nows because what did you guys say earlier in one of the rules? Know your team role. Don't go half and half. Don't have Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook and then, lead by nothing but rookies at every other position and hope that you don't evolve. So I'll give Billy some credit, especially after the Bills suck this year. And he has to hear about that from me.
I will add on because that was going to be like my honorable mention. Because if you actually scroll down to look at his taxi squad is Mingo, Wilson, Perry, Scott, Downs. So he's addressed the younger wide receivers as well. They're just all on his taxi squad as of right now. So hopefully, no serious injuries, but hopefully we can force him to move them off of his taxi squad, and then he has to drop players, that we can all go and fight over at that point.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much for being so generous with your time tonight. Nate and Gator, you guys, thank you again for hanging out with us. Everybody in the chat, thank you for chiming in. You guys are definitely appreciated. Guys, make sure you are following all of us on Twitter. You can find Nate at Nate Markham. You can find Jay over at FantasyJ77. Make sure to be following Tyler Tyler Heil and Jorge over at Jorge B. Edwards. You follow me at Stacy_83. Don't forget to subscribe to our show here on YouTube. Follow us everywhere on social media. Guys, we will be back next week with some more awesome Dynasty content for you. Have a good night, everybody.
Wow!